New this morning, this is just into CNN. Ukraine's military is claiming one of its strikes struck a place where hundreds of Russian troops were being housed, killing hundreds of them. This in the occupied Donetsk region. According to both Ukrainian and pro-Russian accounts, the troops were stationed next to an ammunition cache, which is said to have then exploded when the rockets hit. Ukraine's military claims some 400 Russian soldiers were killed, another 300 injured. CNN cannot independently confirm those numbers. The Russians put the death toll at 63. Here with me now, CNN military analyst, retired Major General James Spider Marks. General, Happy New Year to you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Happy New Year, Jim. Thank you.
So first, the news of this strike. I don't have to tell you that for a commander, force protection is a #1 priority for troops. And this is early here. We don't know all the details, but at least Ukrainian claims they struck the ammunition cache that exploded, then killed perhaps hundreds of Russian troops. Significance of that, and why would troops be right next to an ammunition depot like that?
Well, bad decision to house your troops right next to what's called an ASP, an ammo supply point.
Yeah.
But the Russians have increasingly, over the course of this war, the Russians have enjoyed a certain amount of sanctuary. I'm not certain where the ammo supply point was specifically, but what Ukraine has been able to do quite effectively is engage Russian forces one-on-one in tactical fights. What has been increasing in their capability is their ability to conduct long-range fires and then to synchronize that with activities on the ground. That's, creating this bubble of synchronization, this air-land battle space, and be able to achieve effects on the ground. And so when you've achieved sanctuary, and the Russians in many cases think they have sanctuary behind these enemy lines, you put yourself at great risk, and you make a lot of stupid decisions like this.
And perhaps an effect of the HIMARS, which is one of the missile systems that has had an impact in the battle there. I do want to ask about the other side and losses on the other side, and that is, of course, these continuing Russian missile and drone strikes on Ukrainian cities. A lot of them get shot down, but a lot of them don't. There are just too many. The U.S. is sending one Patriot battery to bolster Ukrainian air defenses. Is that insufficient? And if so, why not more?
Yeah, very insufficient. Look, where this Patriot battery is going to be deployed will provide tremendous point air defense. In other words, the area around where that battery is deployed, probably 6 launchers, will enjoy an increased amount of protection. I mean, the Patriot is a quite phenomenal capability. But in order to protect infrastructure in schools and hospitals, I mean, all the targets, all the infrastructure that the Russians going after, is you need a much larger array of air defense capabilities. And right now, the Ukrainians have a mix of former Soviet Russian capabilities. Now this Patriot battery will be coming into the fight, but probably not for a couple of months, because the train-up period for that is pretty significant. This is a step in the direction, but it's insufficient to your question.
Sure, and we should acknowledge it's the biggest country in Europe, right? I mean, it's a lot of territory to defend from these relentless strikes. Before we go, we've heard Ukrainian officials publicly warning about the potential for a big Russian offensive in the new year. U.S. sources I've spoken to have said they doubt Russia has, frankly, the forces or the capability to do so. What do you expect?
Yeah, they don't. Look, I think the Russians have a certain level of self-awareness, right? They've been getting their butts kicked, and they realize that. And so when they engage with the Ukrainians, they have zero result. So I think what Russia would like to be able to do is have Belarusian forces come down directly south toward Kyiv, and at the same time move forces up to the Donbas and try to, connect these two and try to conduct some type of synchronization. But they lack the ability. The Russian military has demonstrated that it's incompetent, it's leaderless. The leaders that they do have are immoral, they're criminals, and so they don't have the capability to do that. But there is certainly, the law of large numbers. They've got the capability to conducting these artillery attacks and these drone attacks, but I don't see a large maneuver operation on the part of the Russians. They just can't do it.
Punishing the civilian population where they can't gain on the ground. Major General Spider Marks, thanks so much.
Turning now to Russia's war on Ukraine and a third straight day of attacks targeting civilian and critical infrastructure. Authorities in Kyiv are urging residents to reduce their electricity use amid emergency power cuts. The Ukrainian military says it shot down dozens of Iranian-made drones overnight. It comes days after Russia launched a blistering wave of deadly missile and drone attacks on New Year's Eve in what Kyiv is calling an intimidation tactic. CNN's Ben Weidman joins us live from the Ukrainian capital. Ben, a suggestion from Kyiv that this is, as much as about the fact that they're not winning on the ground as the attacks from the sky.
That's really been the case going back to September when the Russians suffered that defeat in the Kharkiv region. The Russians have increasingly targeted the infrastructure, particularly the energy infrastructure of this country. And as far as Kyiv goes, Max, over the 4 of the last 5 days, we have seen strikes on the capital here. Over the weekend, as many as 45. They're using these Shahed 135 Iranian-made drones, which explode upon impact. Now, the strike on New Year's Eve, it killed 1 person at the time. Dozens others were injured, but another person of those injured has passed away today. As you mentioned, the authorities here are calling upon people to conserve their use of electricity because of the damage caused to the power system. Now, we're also hearing from the TASS, the Russian news agency, that as many as 63 Russian soldiers were killed on a strike, a Ukrainian strike on Makivka, which is in the occupied part of the Donetsk region. So the Ukrainians continue to fight back, clearly, somewhat effectively. Max?
In terms of what Kyiv is preparing for now, how are they dealing with their strategy through the winter? How can they cope with these onslaughts?
Well, it depends upon how badly the infrastructure is hit on any given day. They're able to repair it to a certain extent, but given that this is becoming an almost daily occurrence, it's going to be harder and harder to keep the system running. Now, various countries have provided emergency generators, but that may not be enough. After all, Kyiv is a city of several million people, and you can only bring in so many generators and the fuel to power them. So they're doing the best they can under the circumstances, but if this Russian onslaught continues at some point, it may simply overwhelm the authorities' ability to keep the system going. Max?
Okay, Ben Weidman, thank you for joining us from Kyiv.